Hey guys, Stealth here. Today in Steel Division we have a game that's going to last only 13 minutes. It's going to be a very interesting performance by BaronVonBoyce. And he's going to be using the gameplay mechanics against the enemy player. Now of course this is something that we always do. You always try to make use of the rules of the game or how you can exploit these rules and trying to get that on your side, trying to get that on your advantage. That's exactly what Baron's going to be doing. He's going to be doing it with a US Armored deck. You can see he's using the 3rd Armored. The 3rd Armored only gets 65 points of income per minute in the first 10 minutes of the game. So that's the phase A. In B it gets 105 and phase C 150. The way that I interpreted this is that the game more or less encourages an armor division to go full on offensive in phase C. That's when it gets the most income, that's when it has the most powerful tanks, and that's when you can really start to steamroll an enemy group. But what if you took this approach and turned it completely upside down? That's what Baron going to be doing. You can see it's a small map, it's only a 1v1, he's up against early riser. Baron only deploys one 30 cal jeep with a reconnaissance troop inside on the right flank, just one. The left side has most of his units. We have an M5A1, a Command M5A1, an M4A1, a Jeep, again a 30 cal with scouts inside, Command Infantry, and yes, take note, Command Infantry don't actually capture terrain, but they boost the effectiveness of the units around them. A couple of infantrymen, and of course they're all transported by the M3HT, which also comes with a 762mm gun. So this is also a nice suppression weapon against infantry. This is pretty much all he deploys, because this is all you have points for. So let's move off into the deployment phase and into the actual phase A of the game. Now it is conquest, so the more terrain that you capture, the better it's going to be. And notice how fast this front line is shifting. This is on 1x speed. The front line is shifting like crazy, and he already has 54% of the map, so he gets a +1 for controlling more. Now he keeps pushing here, and it seems that there is an enemy group somewhere over on the right, because over here the front line isn't moving as fast as you would expect it to. In fact, it's even coming back a bit. Now he rushes forward to this position, where he can get a crossfire or fire both left and right on whatever the enemy is fielding. This is where the enemy, you could say, makes his first mistake. He's using an airborne deck, the 91st Luftlande, and these guys tend to do very well if they make it inside of buildings. If they don't, and you offload them prematurely, the way that has happened here, then you get yourself into trouble. Especially against an armored deck. Because these guys aren't even stopping. Yes, some of the tanks are still stopping and taking shots. And the guys on the right side are starting to take some serious damage here. Some of them are pinned down, some of them are scrambling for cover. But by doing this, he basically took the punch out of the Luftlande, which means that, since they don't have their vehicles, they're going to be dead slow. In the meanwhile, he pushes on. Now note the front line. It is one very deep push into enemy territory. Note also where the enemy can bring in reinforcements. He has 4 land reinforcement positions. It's this big road here, it's this road along the river, it's this road where you just saw the Panzer 39 spawn, and it is this position along the, the farms, let's say, the farm village. This is also a position where you can bring in reinforcements. If you manage to push the enemy front line back, and you actually control a position along those lines, the enemy can no longer bring in reinforcements. At the same time, this allows you to control a decent portion of the map, but this is where stuff can get tricky. Because you can see that red has actually encircled blue. Now at current, blue is much stronger. They have far better units, they have far better veterancy, and they have a pretty strong position. You can see that the enemy tried to bring in a light tank, immediately got hammered by the M5A1, and just got the crew killed quite quickly. The problem that you can see here is that at some point you may get your units panicked a bit sooner than they normally would, because the enemy is encircling you. So your resupply lines are cut off, and thereby your troops are basically panicking. What do? We're encircled. So he's trying to push forward with a group of arm rifles. Lately I've been told that these stand for armored rifles, in the sense that they were early mechanized infantry, which is interesting. I hadn't looked at it that way. He also has the M3 HT standing by there for additional machine gun support. This large push into the enemy line has allowed him to capture 56% of the map, allowing him a steady +1. You can see it's ticking up pretty damn quickly. Of course, you have to make it all the way to 2,000 points. This is not Wargame after all. And it seems that the enemy infantry is mostly along the middle of the map. Yes, they have engaged the recon group here, and Baron has been fielding some reinforcements here, but mostly to keep them at bay. He's not looking for a direct conflict, because he knows that it's going to be tricky to win against these numbers. There's just a lot of infantry there, and they will probably overwhelm him. He's managed to neutralize at least one of the enemy resupply lines. You can see here this land route is no longer available because it is completely... blue pushed its line completely to the white line of the edge of the map. That's not the only time he's doing that. He's doing the same thing here. That's another resupply line dead. So what he's basically doing is pushing the enemy to only use these two routes. And yes, they can still call an aircraft, which is a strong suit of the enemy forces, being an airborne deck, or pretty much an airborne deck. So that is something that the enemy could do, bring an aircraft. Now, he doesn't have a lot of AA here. Some of these units are just completely defenseless if the enemy would bring an aircraft. Also on the left, he has nothing to deal with these tanks, or this one tank that's coming in. But what he is doing is gradually pushing out with his rifles towards the left to again increase the size of his front line, so that the enemy has absolutely nowhere to go and has no way to bring in reinforcements. And thereby he's pushing out this third reinforcement route that's coming right along this road. And meanwhile, we're seeing some skirmishing going on over here. It's nothing too serious. Looks like we have a slight artillery issue here. But even if these vehicles get destroyed, it's not that big of a deal, because the main problem for the enemy is happening right here. This is the only reinforcement route that they have left. If they lose this, they have no way to bring in forces, and they have absolutely no way of trying to get rid of these reinforcements. Now, they managed to get one group in here. Not exactly sure how they managed to pull that off, but they did bring in one group of reinforcements. And he's now bringing in multiple units over on the left. A couple of Opel Blitzes are coming in, and we have a tank, and we have some very advanced, or at least very elite, airborne groups coming in here, which managed to take out one of his M3 HTs. Meanwhile, the enemy has pushed back. They have now control over 55% of the map, which used to be 58%. But it doesn't really matter, because it is just not going to happen for the enemy. Because the Command M5A1 and the M4A1 that he started out with are still pushing forward. They are still trying to get side shots or any sort of shots on units that are coming in along the road. And Red knows it. Early Riser brings in units along this route. It's the only thing he has left. But it is infantry, mostly. And it has nowhere to go. There's just a line of hedges there. There's no buildings, there's no villages, nothing that you can use. So there's no good, quick way of getting rid of these guys that are controlling your resupply lines. Now, interestingly, we are still looking at Phase B. He hasn't even made it to Phase B yet. Phase B is going to start in 2.5 minutes. So, whereas the deck arguably does best in Phase B or even C, he's not even using that. He's not even using those units. He's just deploying as much as possible, basically rushing the enemy team, and thereby getting such an amount of map control that the enemy team just doesn't have anywhere to go. Now, I was slightly wrong about the units here. These are AT guns, but the AT guns are immediately taking a lot of fire from the tanks here. The tanks seem to have been shot at, but they are not really they're not really panicked at all. And so the enemy doesn't really have anything left to do, but slowly but steadily get pushed out of position here. You can see we have another M5A1 coming in, another Command M5A1 trying to cut off this road. And with the kill of that unit, he keeps pushing and is currently at 64%, 65% of the map, plus 3 coming in. This is really, really quickly ticking up all the way to 2,000. So we have 2 minutes left on the game, and Red basically has nothing that they can do. I really don't have a clue about how you could get out of this, and that's what I want your input for. If the enemy does come in with a push like this, what would you do? How would you try to counter it? Let me know in the comments down below, because I'm really interested to devise a counter to this strategy. Because this could be extremely effective, and we need to have some way of neutralizing it, or at least some way of coming back from it. You could argue that had the Luftlande not offloaded its infantry right there at the start and kept pushing, that would have presented problems. They could have pushed along this side where the enemy only had that recon jeep, that M30, or the recon jeep with the 30 cal on it, and 1 scout group. They could have easily pushed. Instead, Early Riser keeps his position along the middle of the map, which really isn't that valuable. I gotta say, I'm still thinking in wargame terms. So I'm looking at a building like this and I'm going, oh Jesus, look at ATGM positions over there. That would be fantastic, because you can overwatch pretty much the entire field. Add another one over there and you have a better line of fire. Of course we don't have those here. You're gonna have to make do with tank guns. Now back to the action. We have a couple of, I think, Fallschirmjäger here, which are very heavily suppressed by all the tanks and the infantry that are closing in. Baron currently at 68% of map control. He just keeps pushing, and he is almost at the point where the enemy no longer has any reinforcement routes. It is just done for Red. There's nothing that they have left. There's nothing that they can do. They're trying to bring in an aircraft, but we have a Mustang trying to get after it. Gets a bit of damage in. Not enough yet, though. Let's see if we still get a trail camera, but there we go. He surrendered. So, major victory for BaronVonBoyce. He got 505 points in kills, 215 in losses, and 1,022 conquest points. Early Riser got absolutely no conquest points because Baron pushed so fast, so far, that there was just nothing that he could have done to counter that. As for kills, look at the amount of damage that these tanks did. Couple of cheap units. The M5A1 is pretty cheap, the Command M5A1 slightly more expensive I believe, and the M4A1 is there mainly as his higher damage dealer. In case the enemy would bring in a bigger gun, this is the one that could take the hit and could still push back. And instead of the anti-tank guns killing him, he was killing the anti-tank guns with the tank. So with the intended target of the anti-tank guns. Also, a lot of infantry killed off, mostly at the start, where Early Riser just dropped them off slightly too soon. And unlike Wargame, these guys move pretty slowly, they lumber across the field, and they just take a long time to get into position. And they seem to be much, much easier to just slow down and suppress and make sure that they don't get into a town. So, there was not that much that Early Riser could have done there. But let me know what your thoughts are. How could Early Riser have countered this push? Or could he have done so at all? I think all decks stand a decent chance against each other. It just depends on terrain and usage. But a situation like this, I think that it shows just how powerful the US division can be, even in Phase A, because they barely made it into Phase B. By the time the Phase B started, the battle was pretty much over. Anyway, enough of me talking. Now it's over to you. Let me know in the comments, what could he have done different? How can you prevent these rushes? What can you do? Looking forward to seeing your comments, and I'll be seeing you very soon for more Steel Division videos.